November 15, 1997. Franco Benedetti walked into the Grand Hotel de Milan carrying a briefcase that could destroy world football forever. Room 237. That's where Diego Maradona waited. 3 hours past their agreed meeting time. Franco knocked twice. The door opened. And the man who answered wasn't the same person who had scored the Hand of God goal 11 years earlier. "You're late, doctor." Franco had been Maradona's confidant for 5 years. He knew every scar, every tell, every nervous habit. The man in front of him had Maradona's face, Maradona's voice, even Maradona's trademark smirk. But Franco knew something was wrong. What happened in that hotel room became the most buried secret in football history. FIFA launched 3 separate investigations because of it. And for 25 years, when people wondered why Maradona never spoke about certain matches, they never suspected the truth. The night Franco Benedetti discovered that some legends never die, they just find better hiding places. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The man who wasn't Maradona stepped aside, gesturing Franco into the suite with a flourish that felt like mockery. Franco's hand trembled as he gripped the briefcase tighter. Blood pounded in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs moved forward anyway, crossing the threshold into what felt like a trap 25 years in the making. "Close the door, Franco." The voice was perfect. Too perfect. Franco had heard that gravelly Buenos Aires accent 1,000 times during those intense months leading up to the '86 World Cup. But the man standing before him moved differently. Straighter posture. No favoring of the left ankle that had troubled Diego since his Boca Juniors days. Franco's fingers found the door handle, sealing them both inside. The suite was magnificent. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, windows overlooking the Duomo. But all Franco could focus on was the way this man watched him, predatory and patient. "You look like you've seen a ghost, doctor." Franco set the briefcase down carefully. His medical training kicked in despite his terror. Observe, analyze, diagnose. The facial structure was identical, down to the slight asymmetry around the left eye from a childhood accident. The hands were the same, complete with the distinctive scar across the right knuckles. But the eyes... Christ, the eyes were all wrong. "Where is he?" Franco whispered. The man who wasn't Maradona smiled, and Franco's blood turned to ice. He'd seen Diego smile hundreds of times, before matches, after victories, during their clandestine meetings in Buenos Aires hotel rooms. This smile belonged to someone else entirely. "Sit down, Franco. We have so much to discuss." Franco remained standing. "I asked you a question, and I'll answer it, eventually." The man moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Do you know what I've been doing for the past 25 years? While you built your little consulting empire, while you slept in silk sheets and convinced yourself the nightmares would stop?" Franco's mouth went dry. The briefcase suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I've been watching, learning, planning." The man turned back to Franco, and for a moment the resemblance to Diego was so perfect it made Franco's chest tighten. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for what you did in Buenos Aires?" "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie tasted like ash. November 12, 1986. The Alvear Palace Hotel. Room 1247. Each word hit Franco like a physical blow. You remember now, don't you? The needle, the struggle, the way his body went limp in your arms. Franco's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, gasping for air. Nobody knew about that night. Nobody could know. He'd been so careful, so thorough. The official story had been airtight. Accidental overdose. Tragic but not uncommon in the world of professional sports. "You killed the wrong brother, Franco." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Franco stared at the man who wore Diego's face, understanding flooding through him like poison. The subtle differences, the wrong mannerisms, the eyes that held secrets Diego had never known. "Eduardo," Franco breathed. The dead man smiled. "Surprise?" Franco's legs gave out. He slumped against the wall, 25 years of carefully constructed lies crumbling around him. Eduardo Maradona, Diego's twin brother, officially deceased since 1975, killed in a car accident that had devastated the family. Except he was standing here, alive, wearing his brother's identity like a perfectly tailored suit. The car accident was staged. Diego helped me disappear. I was in trouble, Franco, bad trouble. Gambling debts, death threats from some very unforgiving people. So we created Eduardo's death and I became Diego's shadow, his double for dangerous meetings, his stand-in when the pressure got too intense. Eduardo's voice dropped to a whisper, until you murdered him thinking he was me. Franco's mind reeled. Every conversation, every moment he'd spent with Diego after 1986, it had all been Eduardo, living his dead brother's life, carrying Diego's secrets, maintaining the greatest deception in sports history, the World Cup. Was Diego's dream. I just finished what he started. Eduardo pulled out a photograph, grainy, black and white, showing Franco injecting someone in a hotel room. But this was murder, plain and simple. You killed my brother because he threatened to expose your little doping scheme. Franco stared at the impossible photograph. He'd been alone that night, certain no one could have witnessed what happened. How did you? Diego was paranoid. He had cameras everywhere, recording everything. Insurance, he called it. Eduardo tucked the photo away. For 25 years, I've lived with this image burned into my brain, watching you inject my brother with enough ketamine to stop his heart. The room spun around Franco, his carefully ordered world, the consulting business, the reputation, the quiet retirement he'd planned, all of it was about to collapse. What do you want? Franco whispered. Eduardo's smile was colder than a Milan winter. Justice, Franco, for my brother, for the life you stole, for the 25 years I've spent pretending to be a dead man. He walked to the door and turned the lock. And we're going to start tonight. Franco's thoughts splintered, fragmenting like glass hitting stone. Eduardo's words echoed in his skull, tonight, as the lock's metallic click reverberated through the ornate suite. The sound seemed to seal more than just the door. It closed off any possibility of escape, of pretending this moment would pass like so many nightmares before. 25 years. A quarter-century of careful construction, of building a life on the foundation of that November night in Buenos Aires. Franco had convinced himself it was justified. Diego had been spiraling, threatening to destroy everything they'd built together, the cocktail of performance enhancers that had carried Argentina to glory, the network of doctors and officials who'd made it possible, the delicate ecosystem of corruption that had birthed a legend. But standing here now, watching Eduardo move through the suite with predatory grace, Franco felt the weight of every lie he'd told himself. Every morning he'd woken in his comfortable Milan apartment, every consultation fee he'd collected, every handshake with grateful athletes, all of it stained with blood that had never truly dried. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his career healing bodies, understanding the intricate machinery of human physiology. Yet he'd used that same knowledge to stop a heart, to end a life with clinical precision. The ketamine had been almost gentle. Diego's eyes had simply closed, his breathing had slowed, then stopped. Clean, professional, murderous. Franco's hands shook as memories flooded back. The way Diego's body had gone slack in his arms. The moment of panic when he'd realized what he'd done, followed immediately by the calculating assessment of how to cover it up. Moving the body to the bathroom, staging the scene, calling for help with just the right note of hysteria in his voice. You're remembering, Eduardo observed, settling into a leather armchair with disturbing casualness. I can see it in your face. The same expression you had in the photograph. Franco wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his throat felt closed. The suite's luxury mocked him. Crystal decanters catching lamplight, silk curtains framing Milan's glittering skyline, marble surfaces that reflected his haunted face back at him. He'd worked his entire life to surround himself with such beauty, such comfort. Now it felt like a mausoleum. I have a daughter, Franco finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Eduardo's eyebrows raised slightly. Isabella, 23 years old, medical student at the University of Bologna. Lives in that charming little apartment near Via del Pratello, works part-time at the pediatric clinic on weekends. The casual delivery of such intimate details hit Franco like ice water. You leave her out of this. She has your eyes, you know. Same shade of brown. I watched her at the cafe last Tuesday. She orders the same cappuccino her father prefers. Extra foam, no sugar. Eduardo leaned forward, his voice softening to something almost conversational. She laughs like you used to, before you became a killer. Franco's chest constricted. Isabella was his redemption, his proof that some good could emerge from a life stained with compromise. She'd chosen medicine not because of his influence, but despite it, driven by an idealism he'd lost decades ago. When she looked at him, she saw a respected doctor, a father who'd supported her dreams. She had no idea her tuition was paid with blood money. She doesn't know, Franco said. Of course not. Children rarely see their parents clearly. Eduardo stood, moving to the window. The city lights painted his profile in stark relief, and for a moment Franco saw Diego again, young, ambitious, burning with the fierce desire to be the greatest footballer who ever lived. Do you know what the hardest part has been, Franco? Living his life, carrying his dreams, becoming him so completely that sometimes I forget who I was before. The pain in Eduardo's voice was raw, unguarded. For the first time since entering the suite, Franco glimpsed the man beneath the performance, someone who'd sacrificed his own identity to honor a murdered brother. Every goal I scored after 86, every match I played, every moment of glory, it was all for him. But it was also a reminder that you'd stolen his chance to live it himself. Eduardo turned back to Franco, and his eyes held depths of grief that no amount of fame could fill. 25 years of being a ghost wearing my brother's face. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of shared secrets and mutual destruction. Franco thought of Isabella again, probably studying in her small apartment, surrounded by medical textbooks and dreams of healing. She believed in him, trusted him, loved him unconditionally. What would she think when she learned the truth? Eduardo seemed to read his thoughts. She'll hate you, of course. Eventually. When the world knows what you really are. Franco closed his eyes, feeling the last pillars of his carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. The man across from him wasn't just seeking confession, he was orchestrating complete annihilation, and Franco was beginning to understand that maybe, after 25 years of running from the truth, he deserved exactly what was coming. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Franco's breathing had become shallow, labored, as if the weight of 25 years was finally settling on his chest. He opened his eyes to find Eduardo watching him with the patience of a man who had waited decades for this moment. Then, Eduardo's phone rang. The sound cut through the tension like a blade, a simple ringtone, but it made Franco's heart lurch. Eduardo glanced at the screen, and for the first time since Franco had entered the suite, something shifted in his expression. A flicker of surprise, perhaps even concern. "I need to take this," Eduardo said, his voice suddenly different, less controlled. Franco watched as Eduardo answered, turning slightly away. The conversation was brief, conducted in rapid Spanish that Franco could barely follow, but he caught fragments, words that made his blood freeze. Fotografias, photographs. Periodico, newspaper. Manana, tomorrow. When Eduardo hung up, his face had transformed completely. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by something Franco recognized from his medical practice, the look of a man whose time was running out. "There's been a development," Eduardo said, his voice tight. Franco remained silent, waiting. "That was my contact at Gazzetta dello Sport. It seems someone else knows about our little reunion tonight." Eduardo moved to the suite's bar, pouring himself 3 fingers of whiskey with hands that weren't quite steady. Someone's been feeding them information. Details about Buenos Aires, about the photographs. The room seemed to tilt around Franco. What kind of details? Eduardo drained half the glass before answering. The kind that suggest we're not the only ones who've been keeping secrets for 25 years. He turned back to Franco, and his eyes held a new kind of fear. "Tell me, Franco, who else knew about that night in November?" Franco's mind raced through the possibilities. The hotel staff had been paid off. The official investigation had been cursory, ruled accidental overdose within hours. The photographs Eduardo claimed to have, those should have been known only to him. "No one," Franco whispered. "There was no one else." "Then explain this." Eduardo pulled out his phone, showing Franco a text message. The timestamp was barely 20 minutes ago. The doctor arrived. He doesn't know about Valencia yet. Proceed as planned. Franco stared at the message, his medical training trying to make sense of symptoms that didn't fit any diagnosis. Someone was watching them. Someone who knew he was here, knew about Eduardo's charade, knew about Valencia, whatever that meant. You're being played, Franco said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. We both are. Eduardo's grip tightened on his phone. Impossible. I've planned this for years, every detail, every contingency. Then who sent you that message? The question hung in the air between them, transforming the nature of their confrontation. They were no longer just predator and prey. They were two men who'd suddenly realized they were standing on quicksand. Eduardo moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. There were others in Buenos Aires that night, other doctors, other officials. The doping conspiracy was bigger than just you and Diego. Franco felt something cold crawl up his spine. Dr. Herrera, the team's head physician, dead. Heart attack, 1994. The FIFA official, Montoya. Car accident, 1998. Each name Eduardo dismissed felt like another door slamming shut. Franco had known about the deaths, of course, had even attended Herrera's funeral, but he'd never connected them, never seen the pattern that was now forming with terrifying clarity. Someone's been cleaning house, Franco breathed. Eduardo's reflection in the window nodded slowly. For decades, eliminating anyone who could expose the truth about 1986. He turned back to Franco, which raises an interesting question. Why are we still alive? The phone rang again. This time, Eduardo hesitated before answering. The conversation was shorter, tenser. Franco watched Eduardo's face grow pale as he listened. Eduardo said finally, "Entiendo. I understand." He hung up and stood motionless for a long moment. "What?" Franco demanded. That was someone claiming to be Isabella. Franco's world tilted. "That's impossible. Isabella's in Bologna. She says she's downstairs, in the lobby. She says she received a message telling her to come here immediately if she ever wants to see her father alive again." The suite's elegant walls seemed to close in around Franco. His daughter, his brilliant, innocent daughter, was being dragged into a nightmare that had begun before she was even born. Eduardo's phone buzzed with another message. He read it, and when he looked up, his face had gone completely white. "What does it say?" Franco whispered. Eduardo turned the phone around. 5 words that shattered everything Franco thought he understood about this night. "Valencia sends his regards. Room 1247. Franco's legs gave out completely. He collapsed into the nearest chair, the briefcase falling from nerveless fingers. Room 1247, the same room where he'd killed Diego 25 years ago. Someone was recreating that night, orchestrating it all. And Franco finally understood that neither he nor Eduardo were the architects of this confrontation. They were both just pieces on someone else's board. The name Valencia hit Franco like a physical blow, but the terror in Eduardo's eyes told him everything he needed to know. This was bigger than either of them had imagined. "No," Franco whispered, but even as the word left his lips, he knew denial was useless. Valencia wasn't just a name from their past, he was the shadow that had orchestrated everything from the beginning. Eduardo was already moving toward the door, his earlier composure completely shattered. "We have to get Isabella out of here, now." But Franco couldn't move. His body felt leaden, paralyzed by the recognition that their 25-year dance of predator and prey had been nothing more than an elaborate performance for an audience of one. Valencia, the FIFA investigator who'd been asking too many questions in 1986, who'd gotten too close to the truth about the doping conspiracy, the man they'd thought they'd successfully intimidated into silence. "He's not dead," Franco said numbly. "No." Eduardo's hand was on the door handle, but he wasn't turning it. "He's been watching, waiting, letting us destroy each other while he pulled the strings." Franco's medical mind began cataloging the symptoms of his own stupidity. The convenient timing of Eduardo's return to Milan, the photographs that should never have existed, the way this confrontation had been orchestrated down to the smallest detail. Even Isabella's presence here. How had Valencia known exactly which pressure points would make Franco comply? "The others who died," Franco said, his voice hollow. "Herrera, Montoya, Valencia's work. He's been eliminating everyone connected to the conspiracy, but he saved us for last. Eduardo finally turned the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. The lock had been engaged from the outside. He wanted us to face each other first, wanted us to tear ourselves apart before he finished the job. Franco watched Eduardo rattle the handle with increasing desperation and felt something like pity. For 25 years, Eduardo had believed himself the puppet master of an elaborate revenge plot. In reality, he'd been just another marionette dancing to Valencia's tune. "The photographs you showed me," Franco said. "Valencia gave them to you, didn't he?" Eduardo's shoulders sagged. 3 years ago. Anonymous package, no return address, just the photos and a note. "When you're ready for justice, you'll know what to do." "And you never questioned how he got them." "I wanted to believe. I needed to believe that I could finally make you pay for what you did to Diego." Eduardo pressed his forehead against the locked door. "But Valencia was just using me. Using my grief, my anger, my need for revenge." Franco stood slowly, his legs still unsteady. The briefcase lay open at his feet, its contents spilled across the Persian rug. Old documents, photographs, the detritus of a conspiracy that had consumed all their lives. "What does he want?" "The same thing he's always wanted, to expose the truth about 1986. But not just the doping, everything. Diego's death, the cover-up, the murders." Eduardo turned back to Franco, and his face held the hollow expression of a man who'd finally understood how completely he'd been manipulated. "We're going to be his final exhibit." The suite's phone rang, its old-fashioned chime echoing off the marble walls. Both men stared at it for several rings before Franco finally answered. "Dr. Benedetti." The voice was unfamiliar, accented English with a Spanish undertone. "And Eduardo. I trust you're both comfortable?" Franco's hand tightened on the receiver. "Valencia, you remember. How gratifying. It's been far too long since our last conversation. What do you want?" Franco's voice was steadier than he felt. "Justice, doctor, the same thing I've wanted for 25 years. The difference is that now I have all the pieces in place." There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling. "Your daughter is quite lovely, by the way. Such an idealistic young woman. She still believes her father is a good man. If you hurt her—" "Oh, I won't need to hurt her. The truth will do that quite effectively." Valencia's voice carried the satisfaction of a man who'd waited decades for this moment. "In exactly 1 hour, I'll be releasing everything to the press. The photographs, the documents, the recordings. The world will learn about the 1986 conspiracy, about Diego's murder, about the systematic elimination of everyone who knew too much." Eduardo had moved closer, listening to the conversation with growing horror. "But first," Valencia continued, "you two are going to have a reunion. Room 1247, where it all began. Eduardo, you'll want to bring those photographs. Franco, that briefcase contains documents I believe Isabella would find quite interesting." The line went dead. Franco replaced the receiver with trembling hands. Through the suite's windows, Milan's lights twinkled innocently, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding in the luxury hotel's upper floors. "He's going to destroy everything," Eduardo whispered. Franco nodded, but found himself thinking of Isabella. Brilliant, compassionate Isabella, who'd chosen medicine because she wanted to heal the world. In 1 hour, that world would learn her father was a killer, and there was nothing either of them could do to stop it.